Hi all, this is Allmighty and it's pretty hot outside, so let's make this video a little bit shorter. This time I bring you a game between Raul Capablanca and Ossip Bernstein. It is the game from the St Petersburg Tournament of 1914, and it is a game that was actually awarded the Brilliancy prize. Capablanca, when he plays against Ossip Bernstein, he tends to play out brilliancy games, and this game was no exception. So Bernstein, once again, his old, I would say, rival, or some would say old punching bag, still suffers a loss, once again suffers a loss against Capablanca. I have shown you the game between Nimzowitsch and Tarrasch, which was considered by many that should have been awarded the Brilliancy prize, and now I will show you the game that was awarded the Brilliancy prize. And the judgment is on you guys, so what do you think? Here, Capablanca is with white pieces, and immediately from the start he surprises us. He plays d4, and maybe he should get at least 1 point for the Brilliancy even there, because we all know that Capablanca is an e4 guy. d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, c4, and we have e6, the queen's gambit declined on the board. A knight to c3, and now knight from b to d7. So following the opening theory principles, development of the pieces, bishop comes to g5, bishop unpins the knight on e7, e3, c6, and now we enter this standard setup in the queen's gambit declined, a very strong but passive center for black. Bishop to d3, correctly capturing on c4 after the development of the bishop, bishop to c4, and now b5, striking and attacking this bishop immediately. Bishop goes back to d3, and now a6. Also possible was bishop to b7. Now we have e4, and e4 is a pretty standard move. Also possible was castle, but what is the main idea for white here? The main idea is to open up the lines and diagonals of the attack here, especially on this bishop through d3, coming with the queen to d3, and then, because probably black will go kingside castle, you will attack especially there. And to actually counter that, black needs to play c5 and bishop to b7 to counter in the attack. But Bernstein, for this game, actually had a pretty different idea, but unfortunately for him, just strategically a wrong one. He plays e5 here, and Capablanca simply captures. Now we have knight to g4, and here I did analyze maybe what would happen after e6 is played. Even though for white it isn't the best of moves, you could play knight from d to e5, but after pawn captures and king captures, so king captures is a must, you play bishop, for example, bishop to e2. Bishop captures on g5, knight captures on g5, queen captures on g5, and black is left with a piece. But it's interesting what would happen, for example, if not this. What if knight captures on e5 with check? Knight captures on e5, and then bishop captures on e7. Knight captures on d3, king comes on e2, knight comes on f4 with check, and king comes to not to e3 but to f3, going for this knight. Queen captures on e7, and king captures on f4. In the end, the material is equal. Actually, white has a pawn, but he has a king on f4. So here you can play rook to f8. And when you move the king will be in check, so king back to e3, king to g8, f3, and bishop to e6. And now the idea is to check bishop to c5, queen to c5, bishop to c4, attack this king, which is, just on a very bad spot there. And of course, first you would play rook to d8 to move away the queen, and the attack continues. So that was a possibility, but Capablanca simply played bishop to f4, which is the best move, just defending the pawn. We see bishop to c5 attacking this pawn, and castles defending it. Queen to c7, and now rook to c1. This is an absolute best move. You're putting the rook on the file where the bishop is, and also where the queen is, and it will be a source of many tricks later on in the game. Here f6 was played, but already here it is pretty much not the best of situations. Here Capablanca could have immediately played b4, but he played bishop to g3, and then the same idea follows, so that I don't want to go through b4 ideas just now yet. I will just tell you a little bit about the difference. Here pawn did capture on e5 and b4 was played. So it was available a move before, but it's also available now. The only difference is there bishop wasn't on g3, so black also had some possibilities of maybe capturing here, but still it would be a worse position for him. Here after b4, if you capture, then ideas like knight to d5 are coming. Queen has to come to d6, and after knight captures on b4, queen captures on b4, a rook can capture on c6. And it isn't the best of situations here for black, definitely. So here, instead of capturing on b4, we saw bishop to a7, but now instead of knight to d5, we saw bishop captures on b5. Capablanca sacrifices a piece for a very strong attack. And here you can capture with the c pawn or you capture with the a pawn. Bernstein captured with the a pawn, not wanting to open up the files, but it is pretty much the same idea. You can here Capablanca played knight captures on b5. Also possible was knight to d5. If queen to b8, then knight to d6 check, king to e7, knight to f5 check, king to e8, and rook captures on c6. As you can see, black doesn't have any more pawns on this side of the board, and the attack is still going on. So this would happen if queen to b8, but instead of that, queen to d8 was played. Still knight to d6, king to f8, and now rook to c6. Pretty much the same idea, so wherever you put your queen. Now we have knight to b6, moving the knight away and opening up the queen, so if the knight moves, the queens can be exchanged, at least that. And here was actually the moment where Capablanca went into a deep think, and he wanted to play a move which would lead him to a better game at least, or lead some crazy going attack. And to actually go through it, he needed to go through every move and a lot of variations. He said in his books that he actually went through 100 variations in his mind, just trying to find the best one. If he couldn't find anything better, he said that probably knight to e5 would be the move to play, which actually it is the best move. So the principle of the Occam's razor, just simply capturing the pawn, and after knight captures, bishop captures on e5, still the attack is going on. You have won yet another pawn, and the king is wide open. But he decided to spice it up a bit, and instead of that he plays bishop to h4, attacking the queen. And the queen moves to d7, and that was the whole idea. Now knight can capture on c8. Why does knight capture? Well, if you, for example, play rook captures on c8, then queen captures on d7, knight captures and rook to c8, king moves, you lose the rook on h8, and you lose the game. This is after knight to c8 if rook captures. If, for example, you play queen to d1, then simply rook to d1 once again, if you capture with the rook or with the knight. Rook captures, knight captures, and rook to d8. You move the king and you lose the rook on h8. So whatever you do, it isn't good considered capturing on c8. So here Bernstein captured with the queen on c6. But this allows queen to d8. Also possible was bishop to e7, which is slightly better even, because it forces black king to move now to e8. And after queen to d8, king to f7, and knight to g5 check, king to g6, queen to h8, threatening now this queen to h7 check, knight to f6 stopping it, and bishop to f6, king to f6, queen back to d8 check, king to g6, and now knight to e7, threatening to capture the queen. King goes to f6, and if you go back to f6, then knight here captures with tempo, and then you recapture the rook with the knight. But here king to h5 is also possible, but now queen to d1. So if you don't go to f6, then you get queen to d1, and when the king moves, for example, capture on g5, then you simply capture the whole queen. So that was possible. So if you played bishop to e7, but we saw queen to d8 check, and this allowed this queen to e8 cover from the queen. But okay, still bishop to e7, king to f7, and now knight to d6 check. King to g6 is the only move. Knight to h4 is the necessary move how to continue with the attack. And there is one important difference, of course. If you would go immediately for this knight capture, then rook simply captures, bishop captures, and knight captures on e8. you can capture the knight here. Bishop captures and black is left with a piece for the price of 3 pawns. But yeah, it is a game that still needs to be played, and Capablanca doesn't want to go into this kind of a variation if he estimated a lot of variations where in the end he will go with a main advantage which would lead him to a winning game. So after king to g6 he plays knight to h5, and here we have king to h5, going even further in. Knight captures on e8 now, and that is the main difference. Now after knight captures on e8 and rook captures on d8, there is this knight captures on g7 with tempo. King to h6, and now knight from g to f5 with check. Now everything is connected. King goes back to h5, this is the only square for him, and now h3. And you can see now with this h3, if the knight moves somewhere, for example g4 is coming and the king doesn't have a square to go to, you will have to give up the knight. So here knight to c8 was played, attacking this bishop, but simply pawn captures on g4, king captures on g4, bishop captures on d8, rook captures on d8. Capablanca goes out of all of these positions with the equal material considering the pieces, but he is 3 pawns up. So one might say just enough to win the game, you shouldn't play anymore. But Bernstein decides to play on, and after g3 made by Capablanca, he plays rook to d2. So he is down 3 pawns, but he still wants to play on the game. King to g2, threatening f3 if the rook moves, and here rook could have captured on a2, but Bernstein decided to go for the e4 pawn. So we have a4, and it isn't possible right away because f3 gives a check to the rook and the king. Knight to b6 and knight to e3 check first. Now the bishop is blocked by the knight. King to h5 and a5 now attacking the knight. Knight to d7, knight to f5 defending this knight, and now knight to f6 attacking this pawn. Not much to do. Well, Capablanca is doing the only thing that he can do. He pushes the pawn, and one of the pawns will be promoted to queen. b5 now threatening b6, so bishop to d4 is played, and king to f3 now defending even this pawn. Not just pushing the pawns, but also at the same time protecting his own pawns. Rook to a2, and of course a6. And now rook to b2 is met with the knight captures on d4, pawn captures on d4, a7, so this is why he didn't go for this immediately. If rook goes back, b6 simply, and one of the pawns will be promoted. So here after a6 we saw first bishop to a7, moving the bishop back, rook to c1, now threatening rook to c7 or rook to c6, and rook to b2 attacking the pawn. But this allows g4 check, and after king to g5, he plays rook to c7. As you can see, you're threatening to capture the bishop and at the same time give checkmate on g7. So one other example of just Capablanca destroying even after he is in a totally winning position. And here Bernstein just played rook captures on f2, sacrificed the rook. Doesn't make any sense, he just played it. King captures on f2, knight captures on g4, you cannot capture because the bishop is pinning the knight, and after king to f3, finally Bernstein resigned the game. So yeah, this is the game that was awarded the Brilliancy Prize at the 1914 St Petersburg Tournament. Now, after seeing the 2 games, you can judge by yourself, is this king walk worthy of the Brilliancy Prize. So somewhere even here, after b4 and pushing the bishop away and the sacrifice of this bishop with the whole this set of moves and just everything here, was this worthy? The king going on this side of the board then back a little, is this worthy of the Brilliancy Prize? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll continue with the coverage of this tournament, maybe show some other games, not just the games by Capablanca. And that being said, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.